Good afternoon, students. Today we'll start with the second chapter, that is genetics. We have finished in cell division the different parts of a chromosome. Yet, in order to understand genetics, you need to understand, like we are talking about gene. So, where is gene present? Then you see cell. Then inside the cell you have the nucleus. Inside the nucleus, chromosome. Chromosome is made up of DNA and histones. A part of DNA is called as gene. So what is gene? Definition: a gene is the physical and functional unit of heredity. Chromosome, it was heredity. Chromosome function was that it carries the hereditary material. Here gene means a gene is the physical and functional unit of heredity, which are made up of DNA, act as instruction to make molecule called as proteins. They make a special type of protein. Now what is that special type of protein? First of all, you have to understand, like when I talk about gene, okay, then you, me, Albert Einstein, Dhoni, Sachin Tendulkar, XYZ, all of us gene are the same. Only by less than 1% only it differs. There is a difference. Otherwise, more or less, the genetical constitution remains the same. For example, suppose, take for example, if I write out here, chromosome number of lion, tiger, cat, chromosome number is 38. But you will find that you are able to mark it out how lion looks like, how tiger looks like, and how domestic cat look like. Although you see the chromosome number of all these three organisms are 38. Then you see for lion, the scientific name is Panthera leo. For tiger, Panthera tigris. For cat, chromosome number of lion, tiger and leopard is 38. But if you see that genetically they look different from one another, you are able to mark it out how lion looks like, how tiger looks like, and how leopard look like. Now if you try to see their scientific name, Panthera, you see genetically these all are genus. That means genus out here means genetically, genus wise, the genetical name is Panthera, but species wise you see Leo, tigris and pardus is given out here. That means genetically they look different from one another. This is the difference in the gene. That means by slight difference only we all are genetically different. Like out here I have written out here, you, me, Albert Einstein, Dhoni, all of their genetical makeup is same. Only by less than 1% it makes a difference. Now that means the study of the gene, its features, its transmission of body features from parents to offspring, and laws relating to transmission is only called the genetics. That means if the definition comes, what is genetics? Then you have to write genetics, it is the study of transmission of body features from parents to offspring. So when I say body features, like say for example, a person may be tall, short, okay, dark complexion, fair complexion, blue eye, brown eye, color of the eyes, the shape of the hair, color of the hair, each and everything, all these features are transmitted from parents to offspring. The study of this transmission is only called as genetics. Most of the students, what do they write? They write like genetics, it is the study of gene, which is incorrect. It should be, it is the study of transmission of body features from parent to offspring and laws relating to such transmission. Now, the question comes out here, like who first started this study of genetics? Then you see the father of genetics is Gregor Johann Mendel. Okay, he had laid the foundation, or he is the pioneer in the field of genetics. You see that when he first started with the pea plant, but it was just casually that he just wanted to see that after each offspring, after each generation, what is the type of plant that he is trying to get. So in order, he just made a very casual experiment in his field. Later on, in his book, Experiment on Hybridization, okay, he had written some of his observation. His observation was published in Experiment on Hybridization. Okay, his work was not so popular during that time, because most of this observation was on statistical data, and during that time statistics and tools of biology was not well developed. So after his death, almost around 34 years, okay, his work was revised by Hugo de Vries, Carl Correns and Semark. What did they do? They just went through his observation, his observable features, and then the study of these genetics was further pursued. And after that, he had laid the foundation of genetics. Today, you see that genetics is such a branch of biology that with this subject, you can take a career, like in genetic engineering, okay, genetic counseling, gene therapy, biotechnology. You have so many other very upcoming such type of field in the field of genetics. So here you see that how, first of all, what type of idea it came in his mind regarding the genetics. Then you see work of Mendel, how and when he started this work. First of all, it was said that during that time, during Gregor Johann Mendel time, it was thought that if a tall person marries a short person, then the offspring, when I say offspring, you have to understand their children. Their children going to be a medium height, average height, which he proved that it is wrong. It is absolutely wrong. So he made an observation in certain types of organisms. So the first organism that he made, since he was very much used to, he was the son of a peasant, so usually you see that right from his childhood he had seen in his farm number of observable features in the plant. But what he did, he took one of the very one plant that is called as pea. Okay, experimental material used by Mendel, that was pea. Scientifically we call it as Pisum sativum. But you see that what actually gave him the idea to go under the experiment, to prove that blending of different features does not happen. Blending of different features in an organism does not happen. The people had a myth that a tall person married a short person, the offspring will be a medium height. He proved this to be wrong. So how to prove it? So he went under experimental observation. In that experimental observation, the plant that he chose was pea, and scientifically we call it as Pisum sativum. Now, why he chose Pisum sativum? Why not other plant? Why not other organisms and all? Obviously, he cannot choose other organism. The reason is that, first of all, let's talk about the pea. Okay. First of all, number one, easily observable features. That means the characteristic of that plant you are able to observe. What type of characteristics? Suppose, say for example, we are able to see tall plant, we are able to see short plant, the flower color, okay, where the flower are present. Each of this will come to know, will see it afterwards. Then another one, it was easy to cultivate. Like other plants, you require lot of care. But this plant, you see that you can grow it very easily, you can harvest it very easily, and you require a very short period of time to grow. Number 3, it has a very rapid life cycle. So when I say rapid life cycle, you have to understand, like the seed when sown, then after that it germinates. Then after that you see that even at home also you see that you soak the pea seed. Overnight you will find that it has swelled up. 2 days you will find that the plumule and radicle comes out. Within a week you will find that the plant grows up to some centimeters. So within a couple of days you get the plant can grow very easily. And then within say for example 1 month or something like that, the flower grows tall enough, the flower is formed, the fruit is formed, and then you can get a very easy harvest. That means in a year, at least you can get around 2 to 3 generation, and that is, you call it as rapid life cycle. Another one, pollination could be controlled. So when I say pollination could be controlled, what is pollination? Pollination, you have to understand, the transfer of pollen grain from the anther to the stigma. Okay, either it is done by naturally, either it is done by artificially. Anywhere when it is done, it is easy to pollinate. That means pollination could be controlled. When I say pollination could be controlled, what does it mean? Let's try to see out here. I will just show by diagram. This is the gynoecium. The pollen, the anther and the pollen grain. This is the anther. These are the pollen grain. This is the stigma, style, ovary and ovule. Now, naturally what will happen? Insects, that is bee pollinating agent, or by wind or by any other agent, when these pollen grains get transferred to the stigma, that is called as pollination. Now when pollination could be controlled, what does it mean? That means, you see, this anther of one plant can be removed. It can be removed. Then the pollen grain from another plant, okay, of the same species, okay, the pollen grain of from another plant of the same species, when this is collected and dusted over the stigma of this plant, it can be done. So removing the anther, cutting the anther and removing it, you use the term called as emasculation. You call it as emasculation. After removing it, what will happen? This pollen grain cannot get transferred. Now, when you are collecting the pollen grain from the another plant of the same species, then after that, after collecting it in a paper, then you dust it and then you cover it. You are covering it with a paper bag. Then what you are doing? You are bagging. That means you are covering it so that it does not get pollinated by the agents from the different flowers of the same species. So in order to avoid that, bagging is done. So here what you have done, you have removed the anther. Next you have collected the pollen grain from the another plant of the same species. Then you dusted the pollen grain, you covered it up, and when this pollen grain comes in contact with the ovule, fertilization takes place. After fertilization, zygote gets formed. After zygote, the ovule turns into a seed, ovary turns into a fruit. That seed obtained, when you grow, then you are getting the plant of your desired character, the plant of the desired character. This you call it as hybridization. So in order to do, you are able to control the pollination. That is why here you see that in pea plant, pollination could be controlled. This was the reason that why Mendel chose pea plant as one of his experiment. Now, come to the another thing. Why exactly pea? These are the things, that means this type of features can be seen in other plant also, in other organisms also. But why pea? Then you see, pea has 7 contrasting character or traits in a garden pea. In garden pea, there are around 7 characteristic features that is easily observable. So what are these observable features? Let's try to understand out here. Here you see I have written out here character, I have written out here dominant, and I have written out here recessive. Now first of all, you need to understand the term what is dominant. Any character, that means parents, their offspring, okay, whether they are going to be tall, short, medium, okay, or what type of character you have taken, what is the character obtained in the offspring. The character that is obtained, visible character, is called as dominant. The character that is not seen, you use the term called as recessive. The character that is not seen, okay, like say for example you took tall plant and you took short plant. Now in your offspring, the offspring is going to be tall. So the character, what character came? Tall character came. We will be doing it in the next class, how this character comes. Tall character comes, short character goes away. How this happens, we'll be doing in the next class. But you have to understand the terminology. Dominant, when I say dominant, then you have to understand the character that is expressed is called as dominant. And the character that is suppressed, that is not seen, that is masked, okay, that is hidden, you call it as recessive character. So in pea plant, he observed 7 contrasting traits. And what are those 7 contrasting traits? First of all, seed color. You see that the seed of the pea plant either can be yellow, it can be green. So when it is yellow, and if it is a dominant character, the character that is visible, that character that is expressed, you write in capital letters. Okay, so yellow, capital Y. Now the character green, okay, seed color green, that is expressed in small y. So when it is the character that remains suppressed, the character does not come in F1 generation. What is F1 generation, what is F2 generation, we'll be doing in the next class. But try to understand the character that remains suppressed, that character is written in small letter. And here you see green is a recessive character, that is why Y, small y. Now another observable features in the garden pea, seed shape. The seed shape of pea plant can be round. So when it is round, it is a dominant character. It gets expressed in F1 generation, that is capital R. And then after that you see what is the other form, wrinkled. Wrinkled, that is small r. That means it is suppressive in nature. It does not get expressed in the F1 generation. It is recessive in nature, that is small r. Now another one, flower color. The flower color can be purple, can be white, or it can be some other color. But what Gregor Johann Mendel observed, the purple color, and it is a dominant character, capital P, and another contrasting character, that is white. White is recessive in nature, that is small w. Then pod color. When I say pod color, the outermost covering of the pea pod. It can be either green or it can be either yellow. So green is dominant, and yellow, when I say yellow, then you have to write as small g. If it is recessive in nature, then you are writing as small g. Then pod shape. The pod shape can be inflated. Inflated means somewhat that is swollen in nature. So inflated, this is a dominant character, so capital I. And if it is constricted, okay, constricted character, you will write in small I. Then flower position. When I say flower position, then you see, take for instance pea plant out here. Okay, now you will find some of the flower or the pod is formed at the tip part of it, and some of you will find that they are formed at the axil. So if the flower or the fruit gets formed at the axil, then you call it as axillary, and if it forms at the tip part of it, you call it as terminal. This is called as terminal, this is called as terminal, and this is called as axillary. That means at the axil. Okay, this part is called as axil. So if the flower or fruit gets born at the axil, then you call it as axillary. If the flower or fruit gets formed at the tip, you call it as terminal. So here the flower position, if it is axial, then it is dominant character, and if it is terminal in nature, then it is a recessive character. Then after that, plant height. You will find that Pisum sativum pea plant either appears to be a tall plant where you require a support, and the another one that is trailing, that is very short in nature. This plant does not require support at all. This plant is referred as dwarf plant, and the dwarf is represented as small t. This is a recessive character. It does not get expressed in the first generation, whereas the tall plant, okay, the tall plant gets expressed in the first generation. That is why it is dominant. Now here you need to understand, you have to be very clear regarding the word that is dominant and the word recessive. Again, student, you have to understand, like if the character, any of the features of the parent get expressed in the first generation, then you call it as dominant. If the character does not get expressed, features are not seen in the first generation, you use the term called as recessive character. Now here another thing, having come to know what is dominant and recessive, also you need to understand there are few terminology in this genetics chapter that you need to be aware about it. If you are aware about the terminology, it will become easier for you all to see that after each and every generation why the characters are dominant and why the characters are recessive in nature. So here genetics is all about not the study of gene, but it is the study of transmission of body features from parent to offspring. That means you see that we all totally resemble like that of our parents. Okay, you see that you all represent like that of your family member when you are born. Okay, when you are born, then you see that your family member will be talking about that the nose is more or less like a grandfather, the lips has gone to your auntie or somewhat like that of your mom or something like that. So here each of these characteristic features are of your parents. It is not of somebody else. Nobody will tell that you are looking like Aishwarya Rai. Okay, nobody will tell like you are looking like Salman Khan or somewhat like that, because you all do not belong to them. But you see that you resemble like that of your parents, resembling like that of your parents. You see that if you have 4 brothers, sister, okay, you have 4 brothers, you have 3 sisters. All the 3 sisters will be dissimilar in their appearance, in their physical appearance. Yet you see that the parents are the same. These dissimilarities, that means phenotype, when you see by their physical appearance, when they look different from one another, this is all due to the gene. So the behavior of gene, the study of the behavior of genes is only called as genetics. And the person who studied, who laid the foundation, who did a pioneer, the first one to study with it was no other than it is Gregor Johann Mendel. So in the next class, we will be learning about the different terminology related to genetics. Thank you.
My dear students, last time we were doing the chapter force and torque, and we were doing the last part of this chapter, that was uniform circular motion. In uniform circular motion, last time I told you that there is a force acting towards the center. That force is called centripetal force. During uniform circular motion, speed remains constant, whereas velocity, acceleration, even the force, that is centripetal force, is not uniform, it is variable because of the change in the direction. The direction of centripetal force and acceleration is towards the center. That's why it is called centripetal force. And I gave the example last time. So today we are doing the last part of this chapter, that is centrifugal force. Centrifugal force, the meaning says that centri means center and fugal means away. Centrifugal force is a pseudo force or imaginary force, that means non-real force or fake force, which acts on a body, which appears to act on the body away from the center of the circular path. So I'll give one example. From that example you can understand it better. We have suppose a giant wheel. This giant wheel is there. Which has got boxes containing 2 seats like this. In the boxes 2 persons A and B are sitting here, and now the giant wheel is rotated in any particular direction. It is rotated like this. It is rotated this way. A person is standing outside somewhere here, means outside this frame, that means outside the rotatory frame, outside this frame, this system, outside this rotatory frame, a person is sitting here. The name of that person is C. He finds the motion of the body B is a circular path, and he says that there is the force acting towards the center, that is the force of tension. So the net force acting on the person B is the force of tension that is acting towards the center, that means the centripetal force. But now the person within this frame, which is A, sees the person B is at rest, and he thinks that why the person is at rest, a single force cannot keep the person at rest. That means there must be a force acting on the person B in the opposite direction to this force, means in the opposite direction to the centripetal force. That means they are directed away from the centripetal force. Then he assumes or he imagines that there is a force acting on the person B to keep him at rest, because he sees the person B is at rest. So he named that force as centrifugal force. So centrifugal force is an imaginary force or is a pseudo means non-real or a fake force which appears to be acting on the body B when the observer is within the rotatory frame, within this frame. That force is called centrifugal force. If the definition comes that what is centrifugal force, we say it is an imaginary force acting on the body directed away from the center of the circular path is called centrifugal force. Centrifugal force is a non-real force. It is not a real force. though its magnitude, we write like this: centripetal force is equal to centrifugal force with a minus sign. These two forces are assumed to have equal magnitude, means equal values, but the direction wise opposite. Centripetal force is acting towards the center, whereas centrifugal force is acting away from the center. In the year 2020, they had asked this question, that is the centrifugal force real or a non-real force? Then answer is non-real force. It is not a real force, and it is not taken as a reaction of the centripetal force, though they are equal and opposite in direction. According to Newton's third law of motion, action and reactions are opposite and equal, but the centrifugal force is not taken as a reaction because it is a non-real force, whereas action and reaction, according to the Newton's third law of motion, both of them are real forces. They really act on the two different bodies simultaneously in opposite direction. So centrifugal force is a non-real force. So with this topic, this chapter is over. That is chapter number 1. So today, my dear students, I am going to start the next chapter, that is chapter number 2, work, power and energy. So chapter number 2, that is work, power and energy. We will be starting this topic just now. So first topic is work. So we say a work is said to be done by a body when the force acting on it makes it move. When a force acting on a body makes the body move, then we say that the work is done. And work is measured by the product of magnitude of the force and the displacement in the direction of force applied. That means the formula of work we will be writing like this: work is equal to force multiplied by product, means multiplication, force and displacement in the direction of force applied, in the direction of force applied. Formula wise we write like this: W means work, force is F, and the displacement in the direction of force we denote by S. The formula of work we write W is equal to F into S. Force multiplied by the displacement, but what kind of displacement? The displacement in the direction of force applied. So this is the formula for work. Definition, as I already told you, it is the product of force and the displacement in the direction of force applied. So work formula is F into S. So for example, you can show this example over here like this. We are having a body, we are applying a force F and the body moves like this. The displacement is in this direction because this is a straight line motion. So the force and the displacement in the direction of force is S. So the formula is W is equal to F into S. Work is a scalar quantity. All three of them, work, power and energy, are scalars. I think you know what is a scalar. Has no direction but only magnitude. So they all have got no direction but only magnitude. So works, SI unit of work is joules. Joules denoted by capital J, joules. Whereas CGS unit of work is CGS unit of work is erg, ERG, no symbol for it. So SI unit of work is joule and the CGS unit of work is erg. Though if you look at the formula, W is equal to F into S, F means force Newton and displacement we measure in terms of meter. The unit works ought to be Newton meter, and in the previous chapter you have learnt that the Newton meter was the unit for moment of force or for the torque as well. This is also Newton meter only, but this Newton meter we are abbreviating it to joule, because joule is used to measure work, and work is a scalar. Just to differentiate work and the torque or the moment of force, there we use Newton meter and here we are using joule, because Newton meter that is for torque, and the torque is a vector quantity and this is a scalar quantity. So be sure that when they ask you the SI unit of work, then we write there joule and denoted by J, and when they ask about the CGS unit, so we say that it is erg. So let us find relationship between SI unit and the CGS unit, or between joule and the erg, we will find the relationship. So just see the derivation, how we derive the relationship between them. We write 1 joule first. 1 joule is equal to 1 Newton into 1 meter. First we will be writing this. 1 joule will be equal to 1 Newton into, when you multiply them, you get the answer 1 joule. Even question may come, define 1 joule of work. The definition we give like this, we say it is the amount of work done by a force of 1 Newton when it causes a displacement of meter in the body in its own direction. We say the work done is said to be then 1 joule. So it is clear from the formula, put the value of F 1 Newton and put the value of displacement as 1 meter, so you get the value 1 joule coming there. So, and same way, how to define 1 erg? We say that 1 erg is the amount of work done where force of 1 dyne produces a displacement of 1 centimeter in the direction of the force applied or in its own direction. So let us convert this into ergs. How we can convert? So 1 Newton is equal to, we will be writing 10 to the power of 5 dynes. 1 meter is equal to, we will be writing 100 centimeter. So answer is coming 10 to the power of 7 erg. So this is the relationship. I think the relationship is similar to the one which we derived in the previous chapter, that was 1 Newton meter we converted into dyne centimeter, that was the CGS unit of torque or the CGS unit of the moment of force. Here we find 1 joule is equal to 10 to the power of 7 erg. So two ways the question may come, derive relationship between the SI and the CGS unit of work. So we will show the steps of derivation. But if the question comes, just write down or mention the relationship between the SI unit and the CGS unit of work. So we will be only writing 1 joule is equal to 10 to the power of 7 erg. So this will be sufficient for this question. Now we have some cases when there is an angle, when there is an angle theta between force and displacement, then the formula of work slightly changes, and the formula then becomes like this: W is equal to F into S cos theta, or in short we write W is equal to Fs cos theta. We will take the cosine of the angle between force and the displacement. So that time the formula slightly will modify and will change and will become W is equal to Fs cos theta. You can understand the logic of the derivation of this formula, how the formula becomes like this. Let us take a case like this. force is over here and the displacement is like this. So we find that force and the displacement are not in the same, displacement is not in the same direction as this force, and there is an angle between them. So that angle, let us show it by theta. So this time why the formula becomes like this? We'll take the displacement in this direction of force is as x. So first we will be writing here W is equal to force multiplied by the displacement in the direction of force, that is x. Now F into x value will change in terms of theta. Now you see how we apply little bit of trigonometry. So we'll be dropping a perpendicular on it and change this into a right angle triangle. So now I'll be using a little bit of trigonometric ratio. Cos theta I'll use now in this triangle. So cos theta formula, I think as you know that sin theta is p by, some people have curly brown here, turns point, that formula. Cos theta will be equal to base by hypotenuse. So base is x and the hypotenuse is s. Therefore we find x value becomes s cos theta. X cos theta. X is equal to s cos theta. Let us put the value of x which we are having from this diagram using trigonometry. So x value I will put here s cos theta. So finally your value becomes now, or the formula becomes fs cos theta. So that's why I wrote directly here W is equal to fs cos theta. When there is an angle between force and displacement, work will be equal to fs cos theta. What is theta? Theta is the angle between, you can see the diagram, between force and the displacement. The angle is there, theta. So this becomes the formula when there is an angle theta between between force and the displacement. Let us take some cases out here. There are some cases, special cases now arises. Special cases. Number one, case number one, when theta is 0 degree. Theta 0 degree, that means when the body moves, in the same direction, as the force, then we can put the value out here, cos theta value, then W value will become fs cos 0 degree. Then we write here fs cos 0 degree value is 1. So the formula becomes fs cos how much degree is maximum? Cos 0 degree is maximum. Then we say that, then we write then work done is said to be maximum and positive, because the answer is coming with a positive sign. So when can work done by a force be positive or maximum? When we say that when the angle between force and the displacement is 0 degree. Let us take practical example of such cases. We are having a body on a straight line path like this. Something is lying over here and maybe a car lying on the road, and you are pushing it this way. Definitely the car will be traveling on the road in the same direction. Car will be traveling like this. This is the car is moving in this direction. So how much is the angle between force and the displacement? 0 degree, because they are in the same direction. So the angle is 0 degree. When the angle is 0 degree, then we say that the work done is maximum and positive. So this can be the case. Or when a body is falling down like this under gravity, what is the work done by the force of gravity? Gravity is acting downward and the body is also falling downward. So the angle between them is 0 degree. So work done is positive and maximum. So this is first case when the work done is maximum and positive. Let us see the second case. That is case 2. When theta equal to 90 degree, that means when force is normal means perpendicular, normal to the displacement, normal to the displacement. Then let us see what happens in this case. Normal means perpendicular or making an angle 90 degree. So we will be writing the formula W is equal to Fs cos theta value, will put 90 degree here. Cos 90 degree is 0, the entire thing becomes 0. So work done becomes 0 in this case. We will be writing a work done, therefore work done is minimum and 0 in this case. When will the work done by a force be minimum? For what angle? We say when the angle theta between force and displacement is 90 degree, or when the force is normal to the displacement. No matter how big force you have, no matter how much displacement you have, but when the angle between them is 90 degree, the work done becomes minimum and 0. This would be the answer for this case. Now practical example of such case. A person carrying a load on his head, moving on a horizontal surface or on a horizontal road like this. Suppose we are having an horizontal road here and a person is over here, is holding a heavy suitcase on his head and walking like this. Is walking like this. So work done is 0 here. You know why? Because the force of the suitcase, that is the load or the weight of the suitcase, is acting in the force is the weight of the suitcase, that is the force of gravity, is acting in the downward direction, whereas the person is moving like this, whereas person is moving on a horizontal surface this way. The displacement is like this, S, in this direction. Angle between them becomes how much degree? You can have a look at it. How much is the angle becoming there? 90 degree. So the work done theoretically becomes 0. So it is the same case. If a coolie or a person is carrying a load and but walking on a horizontal surface, is doing no works. So it doesn't mean that we should not pay. So we normally pay for carrying this one. We pay their charges, wages. Because theoretically, though he is not doing any work due to for carrying the suitcase, because the angle between the force and displacement is 90 degree. So this can be one case why the person carrying a load on his head and walking on a horizontal surface does no work, because the angle between force and the displacement in such situation or in such case becomes 90 degree. So this is one example. Another example you can see, the work done by the centripetal force to keep a body moving in a uniform circular motion along a circular path is also 0, is always 0. So you can have a look at it. Suppose the body is moving in a circular path with a constant speed, that means the direction of velocity is given by the tangent, as I discussed in the previous chapter. At any point, when the direction of displacement also will be along the tangent. Displacement S also will be like this. Displacement will be also along the tangent. Will be tangential. So what direction does the force act here on the body to keep it moving? You have learned in the previous chapter that force is called centripetal force, and it is directed towards the center and it acts along the radius inward towards the center. So how much is the angle between force and displacement here? Between tangent and the radius, the angle is always 90 degree. Here also theta value we find there 90 degree. So thus we can say that the work done by centripetal force to keep a body moving in a uniform circular motion is 0 degree. So this year in 2020 they had asked this question: what is the work done by a planet to keep a satellite revolving around it in the orbit? The answer you will write 0. If they ask you the reason for it, you say that the force acting on the satellite is the centripetal force, which is normal to its displacement at any instant of time or at any point of its motion. So the force and the displacement is making 90 degree, or the force is normal to the displacement, so the work done is 0. So this could be the answer for this question. So this kind of question we can see always when the theta makes 90 degree angle, then the work done is 0. So no matter how big force you give and how much displacement the body has, the work done becomes 0. Now the case 3. In case 3, you will have theta value 180 degree. That means when the force is opposite to the displacement, when the force is opposite to the displacement, when the force is opposite to the displacement. So let us see the formula. W is equal to, we write here Fs cos 180 degree first. Fs cos 180 degree value is -1. So answer will come with the minus sign here. So we write there, in this case the work done is negative. Work done is negative. Under this situation or under this case, work done will be negative. When will the work done by a force be negative? When the force acts in the direction opposite to the displacement. What are the example of such case? Work done by the frictional force is always negative, because when the body moves in a particular direction, friction will always act in the direction opposite to the motion. So the work done by the friction force is negative. Another example, a body is thrown vertically up. So what is the work done by the force of gravity on it? Force of gravity always acts in the downward direction, whereas the body is moving upwards. The motion and the force is in exactly opposite direction. So work done will be negative, because that time the angle becomes 180 degree and the work will be negative. So there are cases like this, situations like this. When you throw a body up, you have to give a force in the upward direction. The work done by the force which you are giving, that is effort. The work done by the effort with which you are throwing the body up is positive, because the body is moving in the same direction as the force given by you, or as the effort applied by you, like this, in the same direction. So that time the angle theta is 0 degree, so the work done is positive. But at the same time, the gravity force or the gravitational force will be acting in the downward direction. Gravity always acts downward towards the center of the downward direction. So in that case, the work done by the force of gravity is negative, whereas the work done by the force which you are applying, which is effort, work done by the effort is positive. So you have to consider both the aspects of it. So we have three cases. When will the work done be maximum? We say that when the theta is 0, when the displacement is in the same direction as the force applied. That time the work done is positive and maximum. When is the work done minimum? We say when the force is making 90 degree angle, or when the force is perpendicular or normal to the displacement, then the work done is 0 and it is minimum. That time work done is minimum 0. I gave the example, person carrying a load on his head and walking. So work done by the person for carrying the load is 0, because the load and the displacement making 90 degree angle, and work done by the centripetal force to keep a body revolving around it in a uniform circular motion is also 0. I gave two examples. And here, when will the work done be said to be negative? So when the force is in the opposite direction, when the force is opposite to the displacement. So we got all the three cases. But one technical question is like this. See, person carrying a load on his and walking on a horizontal surface like this. So if question comes, explain why he does work and why he does not do work. There are both possibilities here. You have to consider both the aspects. For carrying the load on his head, for work done for carrying the load is 0, because the load is acting downward direction and the person is moving in the horizontal direction. The angle between them is exactly 90 degrees. As I showed you the diagram as well. Because the angle theta becomes 90 degree for the load and the displacement. But why he does work? Because of his walk. Suppose we are standing and starting to walk now. So when we walk, so we are pushing the ground in this direction and the ground is giving us reaction. So that time the reaction force and our displacement is in the same direction. So we are doing work that is also positive work due to the reaction force which we are getting it from the ground. So the person does the work due to his normal walk. Suppose you are walking, you are doing work because you are pressing the ground and the ground is giving you a reaction force. The reaction force and the and your motion and your displacement is in the same direction. So you are doing work because of the reaction force, because the theta is 0 degree in that case. But here for carrying the load you are not doing work because the load is in the downward direction vertically and you are moving in the horizontal direction. So between vertical and horizontal the angle is exactly 90 degree. So when the angle is 90 degree the work is not done, work done is 0. So if question comes why he does work, we say he does work due to his normal walk, because the normal walking time the reaction force and the displacement is making 0 degree angle. And why he does not do the work, because the load which he is carrying and the displacement is perpendicular to each other or is making 90 degree angle with each other. So hope this part is clear. I suppose when is the work done, positive, negative and even minimum the value. Let us see now the conditions for no work done by a force, When will work be not done by a force? We'll see that aspect now. So there are two conditions when we apply force on the body and there is no work done by the body. We'll check that. So first condition when displacement is 0. When displacement in the body is 0 by the force. That means when S is 0, in short we can write when S is 0, work done is also 0, because the formula tells you that W is equal to F into S. So when S is 0, then work done is also 0. So that is first condition for no work done by a force. What are the example for this case? Suppose we are trying to press a wall of a room. You think that the wall of a room will be able to be moved by your force? Answer is probably no. So when you apply a force on a body, though the force may be very large on the body and the body is not moving at all, so definitely the work done is 0, because the displacement is not there only. A person, another example you can take it this way, a person holding very heavy suitcase and waiting for a bus. So do you think that he is doing any work? Though he may be feeling very tired, very exhausted and all, but he does no work because there is no displacement. He is just waiting only, so he is not moving at all. So there is no displacement, the work done is 0. A person moving from one point to one point and again returning back to the same point, does he do work? The answer is no, because the displacement is 0. 1 year in ICC they had given this question, an athlete is taking one complete round in a circular path. When he completes one round, what is the work done by him? Then answer is 0, because the displacement is back to the same point. Then answer is 0. And another example you can take it this way. Suppose you are from here, you are going to Siliguri and again returning back to your own place where from you started. Is the work done? The answer is no, because the displacement is 0, because you are going and coming back to the same point. So the displacement is 0, so work done is also 0. What is the work done by the bob of a pendulum? Simple pendulum. When it completes one oscillation means complete to and fro motion, going and coming back to the same point. So that time also the displacement is 0, so work done is 0. So this case is clear, I suppose. And the second case we have, there is a second case also when force is normal to the displacement, normal to the displacement, then also the work done is 0. I think you have seen this case, that was case number 2 which I had discussed some time back. That means when theta equal to 90 degree, What is theta? Theta was the angle between force and the displacement. So in this case also, because the formula, complete formula of work was W is equal to Fs cos theta. That means cos 90 degree. Cos 90 degree makes everything 0. So work done is 0. So these are the two conditions when we are applying force on a body, yet the work done by the force is 0. So these are the two conditions. I remember 1 year in ICC they had given a simple question, a slightly tricky way. What is the condition for the work to be done by a force? They were not asking what is the condition for no work. Under what condition the work is said to be done by a force? That was the question. What is the condition for the work to be done by a force? So that time we say, we just reverse these two conditions. We write that when displacement in the body is unequal to 0, or you can write the value like this, S unequal to 0, you can put there. Is not equal to 0, you can write, or you can write is unequal to 0, unequal to or not equal to 0, you can write. And the second case, you can, when the force is not perpendicular or not normal to the displacement, that means when theta is unequal to 90 degree, you can just reverse these two conditions. Then the work will be done definitely. When displacement is unequal to 0 and you are giving a force, then there is some work done. And if the angle between the force and the normal force and the displacement is not equal to 90 degree, that means force is not normal to the displacement, then the work is definitely done. So you have to be very careful while writing the answer. You have to read the questions very properly, whether they are asking the conditions for no work done by a force or work done by a force. So accordingly you can answer this. So this much is the lesson for today. So we'll continue with this chapter and we'll discuss more thing in the next class to come. Thank you.
Good afternoon, children. After having finished the 4 untouched poems in ICSE, from today we will move on to the 3 poems which had come in 2019. And the first poem that we will do will be the poem, The Patriot. The first thing you will have to note is what kind of a poem is The Patriot. This poem is a monologue. A monologue is a poem where one is the speaker in the poem and one more or others are present in the poem, but they do not speak in the poem. We know about their presence from hints in the poem, from the reactions that they give in the poem, but they do not utter a word in the poem. So this poem is a monologue because the speaker in the poem is the patriot. And we obviously know that the people of that town where the patriot had come to a hero's welcome, they are the passive, silent listeners. They don't speak, they don't utter a word, but they do react. Therefore, the poem is a monologue. Now you will have to be very careful about the timing in the poem. Remember, just for example, the poem is beginning on 12th May 2020. As the patriot is walking along the road on 12th May 2020, he is remembering in the first 2 stanzas how he had been given a hero's welcome by the people of that town on 12th May 2019, that is a year back. And from the 3rd stanza, we will slowly come to the present, that is 12th May 2020, when he is being taken to be hanged to death. So, in the first two stanzas of the poem, the patriot is remembering how he had been given a hero's welcome a year back on this day on his entry into the town. Now, let us start with the poem. Remember, in the first stanza, he is remembering the hero's welcome he had been given on 12th May 2019. It was roses, roses all the way, with myrtle mixed in my path like mad. Imagine, as the patriot was walking along the road, he was given a hero's welcome, a resounding welcome, because he was a great man in the eyes of the people of that town. So, the people standing by the roadside, they were throwing roses on his way to give him a warm welcome. They were throwing myrtles on his way to give him a hero's welcome. Myrtle is an evergreen shrub that produces sweet-smelling flowers. Now, these people were throwing roses and myrtles on the path of this patriot. These two flowers do have some symbolic significance. These two flowers, roses and myrtles, they symbolize love, honor, respect, and glory. That means the people of that town on that day loved the patriot, had honor for the patriot, respected the patriot, glorified the patriot for whatever he had done for his countrymen. The house roofs seemed to heave and sway. The rooftops of the houses by the side of that road were crowded with hundreds and thousands of people. These people were obviously shouting, praising, glorifying the patriot. In the eyes of the patriot, the people were not breathing, the people were not shouting and praising. It seemed as if the rooftops were breathing, swaying, moving, praising, shouting to glorify him and to appreciate what he had done for his countrymen. The church spires flamed, such flags they had. It means the conical minarets on the tops of the churches were decorated with multicolored flags. And as these multicolored flags were fluttering in the wind or the breeze, it seemed as if the minarets on top of the churches were burning. This multicolored flags symbolize the happiness and the joy of the people of that town when they were welcoming their hero, the patriot. Now see, as I was telling you about the timing, a year ago on this very day, that means he had been given a hero's welcome on 12th May 2019. I repeat, this date and time is fictitious. This I am giving just to make it easier to understand. He is walking on 12th May 2020, remembering what had happened on that very day a year back when he had been glorified as a hero. Now, in the first stanza, you will notice that there are some figures of speech. Look at the second line. Myrtle mixed in my path like mad. Repetition of the M sound, therefore alliteration. Now look at the third line. The house roofs seem to heave and sway. I told you, the rooftops were not breathing and swaying and moving and shouting. It were the people who were there on those rooftops. So the roof here has been personified, given human-like qualities, and therefore the figure of speech is personification. Am I clear? Next, look at the fourth line. The church spires flamed. This is an example of a metaphor. You know, a metaphor is a comparison without the use of words like and as. The church spires flamed, meaning due to the multicolored flags, the church minaret seemed to be on fire. So the multicolored flags here are described as the rays and the flames of a fire. So an implied comparison, therefore a metaphor. The patriot continues with this day a year back. Again, we see the reaction of the people to the patriot coming to the town. The air broke into a mist with bells. The church bells were ringing in order to welcome the hero, the patriot. And just as mist or fog fills the air on that day, the air was filled with the echoes of the church bell ringing. The old walls rocked with the crowd and cries. You know, the people were shouting and praising so much that the sounds made by the shouting people seemed to go and hit the old walls of the town, and the old walls seemed to move and shake and sway due to the shouts and the cries of the people of that town. Had I said, good folk, mere noise repels, but give me your son from yonder skies. On that day, because the patriot was considered to be a hero, the people were ready to do anything for him. If the patriot had said that, my dear people, I don't like the noise that you are making. Instead of that, bring me the sun from the sky. The people of the town would have said, okay, no problem. We will get for you the sun. That means they were ready to do anything for the patriot. So much respect and honor they had for him. Now these two lines have some symbolism also. I have given it here, mere noise, ... your son. Actually, symbolically, the patriot means to say that he doesn't want temporary praises from the people. What he is aspiring for, what he is looking for, and what he wants is permanent glory and fame. He wants his name to be imprinted in the hearts of the people. He wants his name to be written in golden letters in the history of that town. He is not happy with only the praises for that day. The reason why this symbolism is here is because of the use of the word sun. Sun symbolizes eternity, everlastingness, and it is eternal, everlasting glory and fame that the patriot wanted, not praises for only one day. They had answered, and afterward, what else? That they are obviously the people of the town. So after they would agree to bring the sun, they would ask the patriot, okay, sir, we will bring for you the sun. What else do you require or need? Imagine, they are ready to do anything for that patriot out of their respect and honor for him, for whatever he had done for his countrymen. You see, in these two stanzas, the patriot is remembering what a hero's welcome he had been given on 12th May 2019. When you look at the next stanza, you will see the next stanza begins with the word alack. Alack, which means alas. You will see there is a change in the tone of the poem. From the happy memories of the past year, he is now coming to the present, his present miserable, helpless condition, where he is being taken to be hanged to death. Alack, it was I he leaped at the sun to give it my loving friends to keep. He is saying, alas, I was the one who tried to do the impossible for my countrymen. It is I who wanted to do something great and give it as a gift to my countrymen. Now, this phrase, leaped at the sun, literally means trying to do the impossible. But it has a deeper meaning. Try to understand. There is a story related to this. According to Greek mythology, there was a character called Icarus. Now, this Icarus wanted to escape from the town or the city of Crete. So the father of Icarus made for Icarus wings on a wooden frame. They were attached to the wooden frame by means of wax. And it was attached to the body of Icarus so that Icarus could fly and escape. But before that, the father warned Icarus that when you fly, don't try to go very near the sun, because the wax would melt, the wings would fall, and you would fall and die. When Icarus started flying, in the excitement of flying for the first time, he went close to the sun. And therefore, what happened was, the wax melted, the wings detached, and he fell down and died. Just as Icarus had gone near the sun and had fallen to his death, the patriot had tried to do the impossible for his countrymen, and unfortunately for him, he was suffering for whatever he had done for his countrymen, and today he was being taken to be hanged to death. Not man could do, have I left undone. What he is trying to say is, what other people could not do, he had done it. What others were not capable of doing, he had done so for the good of his countrymen. And then there is a tone of dejection, sadness, sorrow in the next line. He says, and you see my harvest, what I reap. This very day, now a year is run. He is saying, now you see the result that I have got today for whatever I had done for my countrymen. What is the result? The perception of the people has changed. The opinion of the people has changed. The people no longer consider him to be a hero. In their eyes, he is a villain because he had done something wrong. And therefore, he was being put to death. Imagine, within 1 year, the entire attitude of the people of that town towards the patriot had changed. And from a hero, he was now a villain worth dying. And all these changes in their perceptions and opinions have come in just 1 year. Now, in these two stanzas, second and third, you also have some figures of speech. Look at the second stanza, second line. Crowd and cries, repetition of the C sound, therefore alliteration. Now see, leaped at the sun. When I told you this, I told you that there is a story behind this phrase of Icarus. So there is a reference to Greek mythology, an allusion to Greek mythology. When past stories, especially from mythologies or the Bible, they are referred to, they are called allusions. So, leaped at the sun is an example of a figure of speech called allusion because it refers to the story of Icarus. Now move on to stanza 4. There is nobody on the housetops now. Today, on 12th May 2020, people are not crowding on the rooftops because their opinion about the patriot has totally changed. He was now a villain in the eyes of the people. Just a palsied few at the windows set. Only people who were paralyzed, people who were sick, people who were not able to go out of their houses, they were standing and looking out of their windows, looking at the patriot walking along the road to be taken, to be put to death. For the best of the sight is all allow at the shambles gate, or better yet, by the very scaffold's foot I trow. People that day believed that the best place to go and stand would be at the shambles gate. Shambles gate referred to the gate of the place where people were hanged. So people had crowded near this gate to have a glimpse of the patriot being hanged to death. Some of the people were even closer to the scaffold. They were standing near the scaffold. Now, scaffold, this word, is used in another way in Merchant of Venice. The word used in Merchant of Venice, we will see, will be gallows. Scaffold or gallows refer to the place or the spot for hanging. So people had gathered not on the roadside, not on the rooftops, but they had gathered near the gate or the spot where the patriot was supposed to be hanged to death. Now see the reaction of the people on this day, that is 12th May 2020, when the patriot is supposed to be hanged to death. I go in the rain, and more than needs, a rope cuts both my wrists behind. Look at his miserable, helpless condition. Today, he was walking along the road with his hands tied at the back. And the hands were tied so tightly with rope that the rope was biting into the wrists of the patriot. But on that day, it was raining also. And this rain has another symbolism. The rain seemed to cleanse or clean the patriot, a proof that he had not done anything wrong. He was innocent. And I think by the feel, my forehead bleeds. He could feel something dropping from his forehead. He could make out it was blood. Now, why was blood pouring out from his forehead? The reason is, for they fling, whoever has a mind, stones at me for my years' misdeeds. The forehead was bleeding because he was hurt there. People who were standing there were throwing stones at him. Whoever had a desire was picking up a stone and throwing at him. And some of the stones hit him on the forehead, and that is why he was bleeding. Imagine, people believed that he had done something wrong. So the people were punishing him for the misdeeds that he had done in the past 1 year. In the last stanza of the poem, there is a sense of dejection, but there is hopefulness and optimism also. Remember one thing, the opinion and the perception of the people of that town had changed towards the patriot, but the patriot himself had never changed. He was today what he was a year back. And most importantly, he never believed that he had done anything wrong. But note the dejection. Thus I entered and thus I go. Meaning, 1 year back, when I entered this town, I was given a hero's welcome. People were ready to do anything for me. People were praising me. That is how he had entered the town a year back. Thus I go. Today, he is leaving the town in dishonor, disgrace, insult, humiliation, because people hated him now. People treated him as a villain now. He was supposed to be put to death. In triumphs, people have dropped down dead. You know, here the patriot is expressing a wish. He is saying, sometimes due to excess of joy and happiness, people have died. He wished he had died on 12th May 2019 due to his happiness for being treated as a hero. Had he died on that day, he would not have lived to see this day where he was being hanged to death. Paid by the world, this is what the people of the town were paying him for whatever he had done for his countrymen. What dost thou owe me? God might question. Now instead, it is God shall repay. I am safer so. Now try to understand. After he will die, he will go to heaven. And God will judge him. God obviously will ask him if he had done anything wrong. He knows he has not done anything wrong. And he has so much faith and trust in God that he knows that God will not punish him because God knows he has not done anything wrong. Instead, God will repay and reward him for whatever he had done for his countrymen. You will notice he is not sad to die. Rather, he thinks death is better because God is always impartial, just, and fair, and God will treat him properly. God will reward him. God will never misunderstand him, and God will always know that he had never done anything wrong. Rather, he had done so much for his countrymen. That is why you will see that the poem ends in an irony, a figure of speech. What is the irony? He feels safe in the hands of God after dying. Look at the irony. He was not feeling safe as long as he was alive. But he is not afraid to die. He is not sad to die. Rather, he feels that he will be safer in the hands of God because God will treat him justly and reward him for whatever he had done. People might have misunderstood him, but God will never misunderstand him. Now comes the question of the type. I have already discussed the type of poem, but what is used in the poem basically is contrast. In the first two stanzas of the poem, the poet is making the patriot imagine the day when he had been given a hero's welcome. And in the rest of the stanzas, he is talking about how the people were treating him, what the people were thinking about him when he was going to be put to death. So you see that there is a difference in the reaction of the people in the first two stanzas and in the rest of the poem. And these two are contrasted with each other. In the first stanza, people considered him to be a hero. In the second stanza, he was considered a hero. Now he was considered a villain. In the first two stanzas, people believed he had done something great for the country. Now people believed he had done a lot of misdeeds. In the first stanza, people were throwing roses and myrtles. In the second part, they were throwing stones. In the first part, he was a free man walking along the road. In the second part, he was walking with his hands tied at the back, a prisoner considered to have done wrong deeds. In the first part, people were ready to do anything for him, even bring the sun. In the second part, they wanted to enjoy and celebrate his hanging. In the first part, people had gathered on the rooftops, shouting, screaming, praising the patriot. In the second part, they were standing near the shambles gate and near the scaffold, waiting to enjoy and celebrate the hanging of the person they now consider to be a villain. So you see, there is a whole lot of contrast in the two halves of the poem. And this word is the key word which breaks the poem into two parts. Previously, positive response, positive reaction. After this word, we have all the negativities of the people in their attitude towards the patriot. And lastly, we come to the theme of the poem. This poem is bringing out the fact that people have very short-lived memory. Today, they glorify you. Tomorrow, they condemn and criticize you. People are very fickle-minded. Their minds change very fast. Their opinions and perceptions change very fast. Within 1 year, from a hero, this patriot had become a villain in the eyes of the people. In the beginning, he was glorified for his great deeds. Within 1 year, those great deeds had turned into misdeeds. People are very fickle-minded. How the opinion of the people, their perceptions change very fast. That is the theme of the poem. And remember, indirectly, this poem is a reference to the great leaders of the world. Today, a leader might be glorified. He might be considered to be a god or a goddess. People might be worshipping that leader. People might think there is nobody greater than their leader. They might be ready to do anything for that leader. They might be ready to sacrifice their lives for that leader. But within a short time, the perceptions and the opinions of the people might change. And that great leader, that God-like leader, that demigod might overnight turn into a villain. There are plenty of examples of such leaders in history, and the poet is probably indirectly referring to them. But remember, in this poem, the name of the patriot is not mentioned. The name of the town or the city or the country, nothing is mentioned. everything has been kept unsaid. The poet has done it deliberately to show that this fickle-mindedness and short-lived memory of the people is not confined to or unique to this town or city only. It can happen to anybody, anywhere in this world. That is why no names have been mentioned in the